If you could create a superhero who specializes in healthcare communication, what would their superpower be? We're going to talk about some of those things today. So really the truth of the matter is that effective communication is really the foundation of quality in healthcare. It not only enhances the patient's understanding, but it also significantly impacts their satisfaction, health outcomes, et cetera. In medical office settings, clear, empathetic communication between staff and patients is really essential to building that trust. Addressing concerns from a patient standpoint, and then promoting adherence to medical advice. That's one really big one. If they're not communicating well with you, they're not going to understand what their treatment plan is. So that's very important. So let's talk about some of the communication superpowers in a medical practice. One could be, I'm thinking, what are your thoughts on this? Empathy vision. If we can understand our patients' emotions, why are they feeling stressed? If we can have the ability to perceive and comprehend those emotional states, recognizing nonverbal cues, their body language, their facial expressions, the tone of their voice, connecting to your patients on a deeper level, that's the superpower of empathy. And it's important in a medical practice.
Sandy, I got a question.
Yeah.
So do you think that, we just get caught up in our work that we don't necessarily see what's going on with the patient, that we know we have a lot of things to do, there's people in line and we're just missing it? Is it we're too busy? What's your thoughts?
What do you think, Carissa? You're in practice every day. What are your thoughts?
It's a combination. So yes, it's you come in, you start working, and then you just start working on what's happening right now, what's happening here. And you don't take the it's so hard to leave that once you've already come in to, I'm doing this, I'm focused on this, to really see your patients. So like one thing that I've tried to do is when I come in and I see our patients in the lobby, I always greet them, say hello, so that way they know, only because I know also maybe especially if like our provider is running behind, I know that there's going to be some challenges, there's going to be some impatientness, so I try to smooth it out. That's one thing I've tried to improve on myself, is smooth it out before it gets to the next level. And I have my staff, they're really great at greeting the patients and keeping them calm, because yes, unfortunately we're not always on time, that we are some minutes behind, providers running in from the hospital, so trying to catch it first kind of smooths out the rest of the whole day of what's going to happen. That's the one thing that I've tried to do and focus on. But yeah, we get busy in our day and the time just goes.
I think that's an incredible superpower, and it's difficult to do. And you visualize that this could be a problem. So you kind of, you stopped it before it became a problem. And what could have happened had you not done that is it could have created more chaos.
Yes.
And turmoil within that waiting room full of patients. Instead, they're like, oh, somebody said something to us.
Yes.
Okay, we're happy now, so I think that is a great way to practice to engage that superpower in the practice. So that's great. What about a jargon translator? Could we, as someone, so this is more someone that, simplifies those complex medical terms, that's super important. Medical language, turning them into accessible terms where the patients are going to understand them. This is important, using those relatable analogies and explanations. I'm curious, Carissa, do you have anything in your practice that kind of gives those simple terms broken down for your MAs, or how do you focus on that?
Broke down, like for the staff or for the patient? Or for both?
Both, really.
Okay.
How do you handle that?
So for the staff, because I know the part on where like the doctor says all this language, and so I've broken it down. So like, for example, if I have a teammate who's not sure what the dialysis is and how that helps our patients, of course, when even a provider tells them, they tell them in the extreme words of, this is what's happening, where I come to say, This is a time that a patient's kidneys are no longer functioning. They are using the dialysis, either, whatever type of dialysis they're receiving. This is now the way that they are having their kidneys cleansed. This is the way I tell them in my own English, I guess you could say, like, and then they
Yes.
understand. I tell them in
That's right.
regular words, instead of all of the, terminology that's, above and great, but right now I need to understand what I'm doing. So I'm going to tell you then, yes, this is what it is.
Yeah.
So I just kind of explain it to them in regular terms so that they understand when a patient might happen to ask them, doctor says I'm going on dialysis, but what is that? Like, what happened now, or where do I go? So they kind of know how to explain a little bit to the patient. And then in the lobby, we have videos that really, again, it's for like diet and so forth for our nephrology patients. And it kind of breaks down, it's real simplified, don't eat, potassium, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so it's very simple, the videos, and it explains it in English terms. It's not like that big, like you said, jargon language where they're not going to know what they're talking about. So that's kind of what I do here.
That's great. And and I think that another thing that really helps to do is when the patient doesn't have their support team with them.
Yes.
A parent, a family member.
We have pamphlets too. We have paperwork that we give. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Another superpower for communication in a medical practice would be active listening aura. This is really the idea of being present when you're talking to your patient and trying to eliminate that distraction. We'll use some scenarios later, but this is really just creating that space where your patients are feeling truly heard and valued. Sometimes that's all they need. And so to have that, engage that superpower, it would be very beneficial in those particular situations.
Sandy, what does that look like? What would you say is active listening?
I would say it would be maybe summarizing techniques, sharing encouraging patients to share openly about their concerns, maybe in a private setting, which it will come also a little bit later. What about others on the call? Is there, Jackie, are you there? Maybe unmute and share what you do in your practice when you have a situation where your patient's frustrated because they're not being heard or they don't understand what they're hearing. So what about a question wizardry? So, promoting open dialogue within a practice, asking thoughtful, open-ending questions to invite dialogue. This uncovers valuable insights about your patient's health and your feelings. We're here to talk to you, guiding those conversations to making a deeper connection with your patient and engaging with them. It will really leave a lasting impact on them when they leave your practice. And the patient involvement in their healthcare journey is very important. And so, asking them questions and allowing them to have that time to ask questions is very important and would be an excellent superpower to engage. What about a clarity bubble? This is, again, related to creating a distraction-free conversation. Maybe it's taking the patient to a place, a room that doesn't have anyone there so they can freely speak, so they can have a more meaningful discussion, really, truly tell you what's going on. Sometimes it's a sensitive topic. And so having that ability would be extremely important in communication. So these are just some, just to kind of get that conversation started, but what other superpowers am I missing? What other powers could we use to diffuse a situation? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Maybe we can move to our exercise to get that conversation started. So here's just like a summary again of what we're talking about here. So I would love to hear some of your difficult patient interactions recently, and maybe as a group we can determine what superpower could have been activated during those challenges, or maybe a combination of superpowers. Sometimes all of these will come into play during those conversations. But what's a tough challenge that you've had lately? We can choose one of these to support you.
So I have one, if no one wants to type in. So a patient is expressing their frustration about their ongoing symptoms, but feel unheard by their provider.
Okay, what superpower should we enlist in this situation? What do you guys think? You can unmute, just call out. What do you think, Carissa? Patients expressing frustration and feels unheard.
I would probably, if it's been continued or they felt, because usually when I've had to deal with that, it's kind of after, like, not the first visit, maybe the second, where it's become kind of repetitive. So I just, I on my end, I talk to the doctor myself to let them know exactly how the patient's feeling. So hopefully on the next visit, he can address it, or he can give them a phone call to kind of go over still some of the questions to clarify, what their questions were. So I'll talk to the patient, or my staff will, and kind of jot them down on where you're feeling still confused, not sure. And then I'll address it with the provider, when clinic's done. And then, usually, he'll say, like, okay, I'll give him a call, I'll talk to her or talk to him. That's kind of how we do it here, because we do have patients like that, especially with our, nephrologists, that, patients aren't understanding what's happening to them.
Sure, yeah, it's a heavy condition.
So I become the middleman, yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, you're right. Absolutely. You want to make sure that you're expressing, you're reiterating this particular scenario. Empathy, would really come into play. They are feeling unheard. They are frustrated. Seems like they're scared. It's not resolving. And so the healthcare provider can say, or even the office manager, medical assistant, any interaction, I can sense your frustration. I want to make sure that we address your concerns. Can you tell me more about these symptoms and how they're affecting your daily life? What that does is, you heard that the patient is not getting better. They feel like they're not being listened to because of that purpose. And so by having that empathetic superpower, if you will, or that empathetic response, it allows the patient to, again, feel heard. What about another scenario? Maybe Alina, do you have another one that you can share that we can kind of talk about as a group?
Yeah, so one scenario I have is a patient receives a new diagnosis and is confused by medical terminology by their provider.
Okay. Yeah. What do you think what superpower could we enlist in this situation?
Is that the jargon translator?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, definitely. I know diabetes can feel overwhelming. It means your body isn't processing sugar effectively, but with the right plan, you can lead a healthy life. Think of it like managing a car's fuel system. And I know that doctors, clinicians, they all have these sort of ways to help a patient really understand, especially if they feel that they need to. But this is just another example of that, and making sure that we understand that when a patient's confused, there's a reason, and we need to kind of pick that apart a little bit. Maybe it is the terminology. Maybe it is they just want someone to say that they care. So what about some other scenarios? I want to circle back to that question. Do you have a situation that you are currently still dealing with and trying to figure out? Maybe it's a patient complaint. You don't want to call them back because you don't know what to say. Can we help you with that, with some of these superpowers, if you will? What about a patient who's reluctant to open up about their health issues and avoids answering direct questions? What can we do in that situation? They're just beating around the bush. This patient does not want to answer. They're yes, no, maybe. Not very helpful to the clinician.
So that would be inside of a room, though, so they'd already be in kind of that bubble area.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that this, that question was, asking more questions, making sure that they're not understanding this. So you need to break that down for them.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, in terms of if you have patients who come in who English isn't their first language, would that go into jargon translator, or would that be more of a active listening, or like, I guess, do these superpowers does one overpower the other, or are they all kind of like they all cohesive, I guess?
I think you said it. I think you absolutely. You have to engage these when needed, and sometimes you could be all of them at one time with that patient. You could be having to use them, but the point is that you need to make sure that your staff. That all people, everyone, knows how to kind of handle that situation and diffuse that using a communication style, whatever that is. The point of this lesson was to really break down that communication into finding what the true problem is. So in that situation, maybe the patient's feeling nervous that they're not going to have anyone that can talk to with their, that can understand their language. So then that would be more of a matter of knowing kind of in advance when that patient's going to be coming in and having something set up for them in advance. Having someone there that could be in the room that could translate. I think that would show that you're empathetic to their needs, also help them with the jargon and relating to what they need for their care. Thank you. That's a great question. So I think unless anyone has any others, I want to talk a little bit about some action steps that you can take in your practice if you're having these issues. So how do we practice active listening techniques? We can train our staff on these techniques, such as, rather than saying, well, that's not my problem, or let me find someone that can help you with that. You're nodding, you're summarizing, you're asking clarifying questions. What else do you need to know from this interaction? Maybe when you're training your staff on this, you can use some role-playing exercises to help your staff actively listen to different scenarios and how would they, respond to that. Especially with those staff members that maybe are a little bit shyer or even those staff members that have stronger personalities or aren't super friendly. There's active listening techniques, role-playing exercises to really help your staff give their full attention to patients and minimize those distractions during conversations. We mentioned using clear jargon and free language in all communications. Carissa, you said it best. You have those things ready to give your patients with clear instructions on everything. That is, important. Having that list of common terminologies and plain language equivalents for even your staff, not just patients, making sure that everyone knows how to explain things to where the patient understands. Open-ended conversations during those interactions. What concerns do you have about your treatment? That way that they don't call you back. Carissa said she kind of tries to explain it all right then and there. I agree with that strategy. I remember we did a procedure in our practice and I kept getting phone calls back and I'm like, remember we went over this. So finally I'm like, why am I reinventing the wheel? I'm going to break this down in the post-op instructions, which seems obvious, but it had to be added. And I changed that form and I added more things and I just completely made it very transparent for the patient. I think that will help in communication in all areas of your practice. And then a welcoming environment, that's going to be very important. Carissa, I keep picking on you. I'm sorry, but
It's okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you had mentioned, your doctor's running behind. Let's beat it to the pass and say, hey, everyone, thanks for being patient, in the waiting room and ease that comfort. There's nothing worse than sitting in a waiting room and not having any idea what's going on. It could be an hour. It could be 10 minutes, and when you have a patient that's scared, stressed, maybe they're running late or they have a busy day ahead, that's not going to go well. So creating that, environment is going to be very important.